15 years in military psychiatry taught me to notice the details, the slightest changes in behavior, barely perceptible gestures, casual slips of the tongue, all the telltale signs that reveal a person's true state. That's why I sensed something was wrong the moment I stepped through our condo door. They let me off duty earlier than usual. The VA hospital had an unusually quiet day. I was walking home, mulling over the oddities in Sarah's behavior over the past few months. Her detachment, sudden late nights at work, her new habit of spending ages in front of the mirror each morning. Small seeds of doubt gnawing at my soul with increasing intensity. Something was off. As soon as I crossed the threshold, I felt it with my professional instinct. Details that would escape an ordinary person, a vase slightly moved from its usual spot, the faint trail of unfamiliar cologne, a fresh scratch on the hardwood floor from someone's careless step. Sarah wasn't home. She was hosting the afternoon broadcast on Channel 8 News. I slowly made my way to my study, automatically noting details. On the desk, a fresh copy of the City Hall Quarterly, open to an interview with Victor Richardson, and beneath it, a draft schedule of important interviews with high-ranking guests. Too many meetings with the same official, too many late-night broadcasts, too many working dinners. Now everything was falling into place. I sank into my chair, feeling a cold, calculated rage growing inside. Not that scorching wave of anger that drives one to rash actions, but a slowly simmering magma that eventually burns everything in its path. On the desk before me lay a photo from the network's last corporate party, Sarah in an evening dress, chatting with a tall man in an expensive suit. Victor Richardson, Deputy Chief of City Administration. Now, I saw what had previously escaped my attention, how they stood slightly closer than protocol dictated, how her hand casually touched his elbow, how they exchanged knowing glances. Turning on the TV, I found Channel 8 out of habit. Sarah was hosting another news broadcast, flawless makeup, professional smile, confident voice. But my trained eye already caught the first signs, a slight tremor in her fingers as she shuffled papers, barely noticeable perspiration on her forehead, dilated pupils. The drug was taking effect. I pulled a small vial from my lab coat pocket, a new development from military chemists, officially for interrogations in special cases, unofficially. I had my own plans. This morning, I'd added a minimal dose to her coffee just to test her reaction. Now I watched the screen, analyzing symptoms like a scientist observing an experiment. And now for today's main story. Sarah's voice suddenly faltered. She stumbled, bringing her hand to her throat. A look of mounting panic appeared on her face. I'm sorry. I think. Her eyes widened in terror as she began glancing around the studio. A classic panic attack, exactly what I counted on. The camera jerked, trying to move away from the close-up, but it was too late. Viewers had already seen their favorite anchor breaking down on live TV. Help! She was almost screaming, tearing off her microphone. They're everywhere. In the corners, watching. Her face contorted with horror as she jumped up, knocking over her chair. The broadcast hastily cut to commercials. I turned off the TV, feeling a strange satisfaction. The first phase went even better than expected. A panic attack on live TV. The perfect beginning. Everyone would chalk it up to burnout, to professional stress. No one would suspect the true cause. In the kitchen, I methodically prepared the next phase. A drop of the compound in her favorite green tea, another in her mineral water, a carefully calculated dose in her vitamin container. I worked with pharmacist-like precision, meticulously measuring every movement. Military training had taught me to be thorough. No traces, no evidence. In my study, I pulled out a new notebook. The first page, a list of compounds with dosages. The second, an administration schedule mapped out by days and weeks. The third, expected symptoms and reactions. Everything like a scientific paper, precise, methodical, ruthless. Lily, our 12-year-old daughter, was staying at her grandmother's tonight. I'd specifically insisted on this, knowing the first stage of the experiment might be unpleasant. Children shouldn't witness their mother's psyche unraveling. Not yet. I heard the front door open upstairs. Sarah was home. I listened to her slow footsteps up the stairs, her labored breathing, residual effects of the panic attack. She'd walk in any moment, and I'd greet her with the professional care of a military psychiatrist. Offer a sedative, specially chosen to enhance the main compound's effects. Sympathize with her condition. I'm the loving husband, aren't I? And later, when she falls asleep, I'll start planning the next phase. I have everything I need: medical knowledge, access to pharmaceuticals, expertise in manipulating the human psyche, and most importantly, the cold, calculated rage of a betrayed husband, ready to methodically destroy the woman who decided she could simply erase him from her life. I looked at our family photo on my study wall. Everything would change soon. The successful news anchor would become a psychiatric patient. Her official lover would rush to distance himself from the scandal. And I would observe this destruction as I observed disease progression in my patients, with professional interest and complete understanding of the process's inevitability. Honey, I'm home. Her voice sounded cracked, frightened, the first crack in the perfect facade. In the study, dear, I replied, hiding the revenge notebook. Come here. You clearly need a specialist's help. The game had begun, and I intended to see it through to the end. Michael, something's happening to me. Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, clutching the cup of tea I'd lovingly prepared. Her fingers noticeably trembled. I don't remember how I got home after the broadcast yesterday. I sat beside her, professionally checking her pulse, elevated but within normal range for the initial stage. Tell me more. I remember finishing the broadcast, then everything's blank. I came to in the bathroom. It was way past midnight. She took a shaky breath. And this morning, the editor was asking about strange messages I supposedly sent all night, but I didn't write anything. Silently, I pulled out my phone and showed her screenshots I prepared from her work email. Dozens of incoherent emails sent to colleagues at 3 in the morning. Delusional accusations, paranoid conspiracy theories, bizarre confessions. Her face grew even paler. That's not me. I couldn't have written that. She read the text with mounting horror. About shadows in the studio, about being followed, about someone tampering with the teleprompter. You need rest. I took away her phone. Tomorrow's the important interview with the governor. Take this sedative and get some sleep. She obediently swallowed the pill. Perfect combination. The tranquilizer would amplify the effects of the main compound I'd added to her tea. By morning, she'd be in precisely the calculated state for the next phase. Waiting for her breathing to become steady, I reviewed tomorrow's interview plan. The governor, live broadcast, the whole state watching. Couldn't ask for a better stage for the next act of our drama. Morning began with panic. Sarah was frantically searching the bedroom, unable to find her favorite suit, which I had deliberately hidden. It was here. I know I hung it up yesterday. Or was it the day before? I can't remember. Sweetheart, you wore it for your last broadcast. I gently reminded her. Don't you remember? No, I'm not sure. She clutched her head. What's happening to me? It's like I'm losing chunks of time. At the studio, I observed her through the monitor in the technical control room. A military psychiatrist's credentials opened many doors. Nobody questioned my presence, especially after her recent on-air breakdown. The interview started smoothly. Sarah maintained her professionalism, though I noticed the first signs: dilated pupils, slight tremor in her hands, perspiration on her forehead. The governor droned on about the state's achievements, not noticing how his interviewer increasingly fixated on something in the corner of the studio. And now, about this year's major project. She suddenly stopped mid-sentence, staring intensely at an empty corner of the set, her face contorted with terror. Mrs. Mitchell. The governor leaned toward her, concerned. You see them. Her voice trembled. There in the corner. They're moving. Black shadows. They're crawling up the walls. The cameras simultaneously swung toward the empty corner. Dead silence fell over the studio. Oh God. She jumped up, knocking over her chair. They're everywhere. They want to take me. You're all in on it. The governor recoiled as she grabbed the water pitcher, throwing its contents at invisible pursuers. Security rushed toward her, but it was too late. The hysteria was building momentum. Don't touch me. I know everything. You changed the texts, replaced the people. She was careening around the studio, knocking over lighting equipment. Where's the real governor? What have you done with my team? I watched the scene unfold with cold professional interest. The reaction exceeded expectations. The combination of drugs worked perfectly. Paranoia, hallucinations, confused consciousness, everything precisely according to plan. Later in the hospital room, she clung to my hand, sobbing, Michael, help me. I'm losing my mind. These shadows, they're following me. They're whispering. Of course, I'll help, darling. I stroked her head, discreetly adding a new dose of the compound to her IV. I'm your husband. I'll always be here. She drifted into a heavy sleep while I sat beside her, recording observations in my notebook. The next phase would require stronger measures. Time to move from hallucinations to complete personality alteration. Outside, dusk was gathering, and somewhere in the hospital corridor, water dripped hollowly. Or were those Sarah's tears slowly going insane under the influence of my compounds? Well, what difference did it make now? The network gave Sarah a week's leave to restore her health after the scandal with the governor. I carefully monitored her condition, noting how she gradually sank into the abyss of paranoia. The new combination of drugs I added to her food heightened her anxiety and suspicion. You need to get out of the house, I suggested on Saturday morning. Let's go to the mall. We'll buy something nice for your return to broadcasting. She agreed after much persuasion. In recent days, she barely left the house, fearing the pursuers she saw everywhere. I deliberately chose peak hours at the Riverside Mall, crowds of people, bright lights, loud music. Perfect conditions for the next phase. The first half hour went relatively smoothly. Sarah was nervous, constantly looking over her shoulder, but holding it together. We entered her favorite boutique where she used to buy her on-air outfits. The sales associate, recognizing the famous news anchor, smiled warmly. Look at this beautiful dress. It would be perfect for. She didn't finish her sentence. I know who you are. Sarah suddenly screamed, recoiling from the young woman. You're watching me. You're working with them. I'm sorry, what are you? The sales associate backed away, confused. Don't pretend. I saw you there in the studio. You were among the shadows. Sarah grabbed a clothing rack, toppling it. You're all watching me. Everyone. A crowd began to gather. People pulled out their phones, recording the famous news anchor having a breakdown in the middle of the boutique. I stood slightly apart, observing the unfolding events with a psychiatrist's professional interest. They're everywhere. Sarah screamed, running into the mall's main concourse. You. She pointed at a random passerby. I saw you photographing my house. And you. Now she was accusing an elderly woman with her grandson. You replaced my editor. Where are the real people? Where have you hidden them? Mall security tried to calm her down, but this only intensified the hysteria. She screamed about conspiracies, about shadows pursuing her, about replaced people. She fought against the security guards, smashing a jewelry store window. Videos of her meltdown appeared online almost instantly. Famous news anchor causes scene at Riverside Mall. Local TV star accuses shoppers of stalking. The comments were merciless. Drugs, mental breakdown, could tell she wasn't right for a while. On Monday, a termination notice arrived in her work email. I intercepted it before she saw it. The news needed to be delivered properly to maximize the effect. Sweetheart, we need to talk. I sat beside her on the bed. After Saturday's incident, she hadn't gotten up, just lay there staring at the ceiling. The network, they've decided you need to take a break from your career. A long break. They're in on it too. Her eyes burned feverishly. Of course, it all makes sense. They were helping the shadows. They deliberately changed the texts, sent fake people. You need to rest. I stroked her head, discreetly leaving a package of powerful medication on the bedside table. Take these pills I brought. They'll help. That same evening, an anonymous source reached major local news outlets. It spoke of the famous anchor's long-standing substance abuse problem, how she tried to hide her addiction, how she broke down on air, intimate details allegedly shared by a close family friend. I sat in my study, scrolling through news sites. The story spread in circles, growing with new details. Someone remembered her strange behavior at office parties. Another recalled suspicious meetings in dark alleys. A third wrote a lengthy post about how they'd long noticed signs of addiction. Sarah lay in the bedroom, sedated. Her nightstand was littered with pills I'd planted for credibility. On the table, a glass of unfinished wine, dissolved with another dose of my special cocktail. Meanwhile, in the city, Victor Richardson, her former lover, was hastily deleting all photos with her from his social media. An official of his rank couldn't afford to be linked to a mental case. Reputation above all, right? I sat by her bed that evening, making notes in my journal. Next to the Drug Administration schedule appeared a new entry: social isolation complete, moving to final phase. I knew this day would come. 2 weeks after her termination, Sarah barely left the house, sinking deeper into paranoia. The latest combination of drugs was doing its work. Hallucinations intensified, reality completely blurred. That morning, she suddenly started getting ready to go somewhere, frantically searching through drawers. Where? Where is it? I know I put it here. What are you looking for, dear? I asked, knowing exactly what she'd find. The kitchen knife I'd deliberately placed in her nightstand the previous night. Ah, here. She gripped the handle with white knuckles. Now they won't dare take everything from me. I followed her to City Hall. Security recognized the former news anchor, even showed concern. Her story had become urban legend. Nobody suspected anything until she burst into Victor Richardson's office. It was you. Her scream echoed through the corridors. You helped them. You knew about the shadows. Victor recoiled from his desk, seeing the knife in her hand. Sarah? What are you? Security. Shut up. She advanced on him, brandishing the knife. I figured it all out. You planned this. My firing. These rumors. You're working with those who were watching me. I watched from the hallway as she cornered her former lover, his polished face contorted with fear, not how he'd imagined meeting his ex-lover. Help. He screamed when the blade grazed his expensive suit. She's insane. Security tackled Sarah professionally and quickly. The knife clattered on the marble floor while she screamed about conspiracies, about stalkers, about betrayed love. Victor Richardson immediately filed a police report. But this was just the beginning. Breaking free from the police station after questioning, Sarah raced to Lincoln Middle School, where our daughter studied. I followed at a distance, knowing what would happen. Lily. She ran through the schoolyard during lunch break. Where's my baby girl? They've hidden her. The security guard tried to block her path into the building. Mrs. Mitchell, you can't. Let me through. That's my daughter. She pushed him aside with unexpected strength. Lily, we have to run. They want to take you. Teachers hurriedly shepherded children into classrooms. Lily, seeing her mother through a second-floor window, hid in terror behind her homeroom teacher. Sarah was already running up the stairs, pushing everyone aside. Baby girl. She burst into the classroom. Quick. Before they get here, I'll save you from these shadows. Mom, what are you doing? Lily pressed against the wall. You're scaring me. No time to explain. They're everywhere. Your father, the teachers, they're all been replaced. I'm the only one who knows the truth. She grabbed her daughter's arm, trying to drag her from the classroom. Lily fought back, crying. The teacher called the police. The sound of running feet already echoed from the corridor, school security rushing to help. I watched everything through security cameras in the principal's office, all according to plan. Now I had every reason for the next step. That evening, police burst into our apartment. Neighbors called them after hearing wild screams and breaking glass. Sarah was rampaging through the rooms, destroying everything in her path. The floor was covered in mirror shards. She'd broken them, claiming they were hiding in the reflections. Mrs. Mitchell. The officers held her at gunpoint. Calm down and drop the glass. Stay back. She waved a sharp mirror shard. I see right through you. You're not real. You're all part of the conspiracy. I stepped forward. Officer, I'm a military psychiatrist. My wife needs immediate psychiatric commitment. I have all the necessary paperwork. EMTs arrived within 10 minutes. Sarah fought back, screaming that we were all ghosts, replaced by shadows. They gave her the injection right there in the apartment. I had pre-calculated the dose so she couldn't resist. As they carried her out on a stretcher, something flickered in her eyes, a flash of awareness, understanding the inevitability of what was happening. Our gazes met for a moment, and I saw in them the reflection of my cold smile. You'll help me, won't you? She whispered through clouding consciousness. You're a doctor. You'll save me from them. Of course, darling. I squeezed her limp hand. I'll do everything necessary. You know I always take care of you. The psychiatric hospital doors closed behind her. In my lab coat pocket lay the commission's conclusion diagnosing acute psychosis, and in my briefcase, documents for termination of parental rights. The courtroom was half empty. Such cases rarely attract much attention. I sat on the bench, listening to the judge monotonously reading the decision to terminate parental rights. Lily squeezed my hand tightly, and I felt her flinch at each mention of her mother. The psychiatric evaluation findings were unequivocal: acute paranoid disorder, severe psychosis, danger to self and others, attempted assault on a city official, the school incident, aggressive behavior, all formed the basis for the court's decision. Sarah wasn't present at the hearing. Her condition didn't allow her to leave the secure ward of the psychiatric facility. I regularly received reports about her treatment. New medications I'd recommended to colleagues irreversibly changing her consciousness. She no longer screamed about pursuers and shadows, just sat by the window, staring vacantly into space. Dad, Lily tugged at my suit sleeve as we left the courthouse. Well, Mom, will she ever get better? I looked into her eyes, the same gray eyes as Sarah's, only now permanently haunted by fear. Fear of her own mother, of her madness, of that last day at school when she tried to save her daughter from non-existent pursuers. No, sweetheart, I pulled her close. Sometimes illnesses of the soul are incurable, but everything will be fine now. We'll start a new life. Packed boxes awaited us at home. I'd accepted a transfer to a VA hospital in another state, far from memories, from gossip, from neighbors' sideways glances. Lily silently packed her things, carefully avoiding her mother's room, which I'd long since locked. That same evening, the news featured a story about Victor Richardson's appointment to a high position in Washington. He gave interviews, polished, confident, no trace of former fear in his eyes. The story with his crazy lover remained in the past, becoming just an unpleasant episode in his brilliant career. At night, I reviewed my notes again, the detailed diary of revenge I'd planned so meticulously. Everything turned out even better than I calculated. Sarah lost everything: job, reputation, daughter, sanity. Her lover got away with a slight scare and a scratched suit. And I achieved my goal. A muffled scream came from the next room. Lily having another nightmare. I rushed to her, knowing what I'd find. My daughter curled up on the bed, whispering, Mom, please, no, I'm scared. Holding my trembling child, I thought for the first time about the price of my revenge. Yes, I destroyed the woman who betrayed me. But with her, I destroyed my daughter's mother, permanently traumatizing a child's psyche. Lily now jumps at every sudden sound, distrusts new people, wakes up from nightmares. In my lab coat pocket lay the final prescription, a new experimental drug that could completely erase Sarah's personality. I took it out, examining the neat lines of my handwriting, then slowly tore up the paper. The revenge was complete, but I felt no victory, only bitterness and understanding that some wounds never heal, especially those we inflict ourselves, believing we're restoring justice. Somewhere in a locked ward of the psychiatric facility sat a woman who was once a bright news anchor, a loving mother, my wife. Now she stared out the window with empty eyes, whispering about shadows and pursuers. And in the next room, a girl cried in her sleep, having lost her mother to her father's revenge. And I understood revenge is a poison that toxifies not only the victim, but the avenger as well, and those caught in the crossfire. I achieved my goal, but the price was too high. Now my daughter and I must learn to live on, carrying these scars. Learn to forgive, not for those who betrayed us, but for those who remained by our side.